Alrighty, today we are with Adam. It is Thursday, October 16th. How are we doing today, Adam?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Alrighty, so kind of want to get into the nitty-gritty of the government shutdown. The Republicans have the House, they have the Senate, they have the presidency, yet somehow it is the Schumer shutdown. Um, can you explain this logic? Because I feel like I personally are lost on what exactly they're trying to portray this being a Democratic shutdown.
Yeah, I think that they are just they're feeling very, I don't know if arrogant is the right word, but Republicans just think that they can make demands and Democrats are just going to fall down and say yes, sir, which in fairness is kind of what Chuck Schumer did the first time they did the CR. But I'm glad that this time around Democrats are kind of holding the line. And you know, it's so ridiculous that Republicans aren't even willing to negotiate on these things because if you look back at the first 2 years of Biden, Democrats also had a trifecta, but they still negotiated with Republicans for things like increasing defense spending or actually cutting back on social spending, which I'm assuming none of us here like, but they actually had those negotiations with Republicans despite being in the majority. But when the shoe is on the other foot, all of a sudden, Republicans don't care about this anymore. And I think it's like there's not so much a logic behind it as much as like we have to appease Trump, and Trump actually likes the government shutdown. He wants it to be shut down.
Yeah, which I think is super odd. Because I feel like a part of me, and I don't know if you've been paying attention to the Federal Reserve and the upcoming
Yeah.
FOMC meeting, but they're set to convene at the end of October. There hasn't been any other data that they've been able to release this month from August.
Yeah.
So we haven't gotten the jobs report, we haven't gotten CPI data, so we don't know where inflation is. A part of me feels like this might be intentional until like the very last minute before the FOMC meeting because Donald Trump has been calling Powell too late Powell for months now,
Yeah.
begging him to cut rates. And so now it feels like to me like he's intentionally doing this to make sure that there are rate cuts come this at the end of October. What are your feelings on that? Do you think that that's in part why he's doing it, or do you have another reason why you think that Donald
I
Trump?
think that's one aspect of it. I think also just like as we saw when those BLS numbers came out and he just fired the head of the BLS, like any roles the government performs in terms of just collecting empirical data, Trump doesn't like those because like typically the biggest foil to MAGA is just like empirical reality. And when you have these jobs numbers coming in and inflation numbers coming in and they don't paint the same picture that Trump wants to paint, it's just not a good look for him. So he shut that down. In terms of the Federal Reserve, I actually think Powell is probably going to cut rates regardless. Like in his last speech that I saw, he was saying like, while prices are rising because of tariffs, the labor market is like extremely weak right now. And actually part of that is because we have a lower supply of labor with with them cutting down on migration as well.
Yeah.
So we're actually in like, I think he called it a don't hire, don't fire market where like layoffs are happening very, very slowly. There's like no new hiring and supply and demand for labor are both low. So if this is some sort of like 5D chess move from Trump to get him to cut rates, it seems a little excessive because he's probably going to cut them regardless.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the immigration thing because I don't think that people realize just how beneficial immigrants are to society, and like what they've been able to accomplish, whether they're legal or illegal. Now, granted,
Mhm.
like everybody agrees that we should have, as much, we should be able to have like a border and create like this legal immigration path that's so much easier than what it is right now. But like the way that it's set up, it's
Yeah.
impossible, and there's like no conceivable way for an immigrant to come to the United States without coming to the border and claiming asylum right now, because like the path to immigration is like takes years and years. And so like it's very frustrating to see them not cut out the root cause of it, but rather just go and try to build this wall and not try to increase the funding of not only ICE but border agents as well. Like they're not even helping with any of that, and they're not expanding the courts so that there are enough judges at the to make decisions on the asylum cases. So like, I mean, what do you think the end goal is with all of this? Because like it just seems like there's not any consistency with the whole immigration thing. Because like now it's just like there's H-1B visas, but there's
Right.
might be exemption for those H-1B visas.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of this comes down to the nativism of Stephen Miller, who is kind of orchestrating the entire immigration policy for this administration. And you bring up asylum, and like there's supposed to be an asylum process where you can show up to a port of entry, you can pass a credible fear interview, and if you pass the interview, you get scheduled to see an immigration judge, and then that judge is going to decide, do you have a valid claim for asylum? And what ICE is doing right now is they'll show up to immigration court on a day where they know someone has a scheduled appointment, and then they
Yeah.
call the judge and they say, hey, we want you to drop the case. The judge drops the case. Now this person is like in legal limbo. They have no actual status. And then ICE kind of like jumps out of the stairwell and cuffs them and puts them in for expedited removal, even if they don't qualify for it, right? So this isn't just about like we want to get the criminals out or whatever. This is just they want anyone who was not born in America to leave America. I mean, they've even targeted green card holders who are like protesting Israel, right? So this is, I think, a lot more sinister than a lot of like normies who voted for Trump thought like, oh, I just want like criminals out of the country. Yeah, everyone does, but this is going so much further than that, and I think it is just a part of like trying to normalize this, like the fact that we haven't had a huge uproar about why are documented asylum seekers being brutalized and having their appointments canceled and being deported where they can't even call a lawyer when they're in detention. They're being fed rotten food with maggots in it. It's like it's so beyond the pale. And still you see when you talk to MAGA, they're like, listen, we have a border, we have laws. And they're just like they've lost the plot from like what's actually going on right now.
And what's always been fascinating to me is like, they like a lot of conservatives are like family values, Christian values, like this thing right here. And then they go and support something like Alligator Alcatraz. Like, I mean, where that there has to be
Yeah.
some kind of cognitive dissonance when you look at somewhere like a detention center in the middle that's compared to Alcatraz, rather with alligators attached to it. Like, do
Yeah.
people not know the story behind Alcatraz, how like escapees would be eaten by sharks? Now their intention is for what, immigrants to be eaten by alligators, and this is the party for Christian values.
Yeah, it's so insane how like it's all virtue signaling because like the entire MAGA movement, I don't want to say necessarily everyone who voted for Trump, but like the core ethos of the MAGA movement is destructive. It's nothing constructive. So when they talk about we want to build up a strong family, we want like strong American workers, that's rhetoric, but all of their actual policy and what they choose to focus on is who can we blame for our problems and how do we hurt them? That's like literally all it is. There's never anything about like here's what we're going to do to make your life better. It's how are we going to hurt these people that are making your life worse allegedly? And like the Christian values thing is so funny because the party that's actually pushing for family values, I would assume, is the party that wants to expand the child tax credit, and some people in the party want like universal child care and like paid family leave. So I think Democrats should try to co-opt this language and actually run on family values as opposed to letting Republican make a mockery of these values.
I agree. I have a question for you. All right, I know that it's really early right now, obviously, but 2028 is
Yeah.
going to be around the corner sometime soon. Who do you think the party leader is for 2028 right now?
Um, so I think right now it's Gavin Newsom, although I'd really first of all, I don't really like Gavin Newsom that much. Like I like when he says stuff to piss off Trump, like that aspect of him I really like.
Yeah.
But like people forget that like when someone runs for president, it's not just do they campaign well, do they govern well? And like I don't know how Gavin Newsom would govern if he won. Like I'm sure he'd campaign really well.
Hmm.
Um, there is also the added aspect of like I'd say like there's like a 50% chance that we don't have a 2028 election. That might sound like alarmist, but I think 50% is actually me trying to cope a little bit, and it's higher than that. But if I had to say like who is our best shot in 2028, maybe this sounds like kind of like a wild card, but I think James Tallarico. I mean, he could kind of pull the Obama thing where he wins a Texas Senate race. He's
Yeah.
a junior senator, announces for president. I think he would win the nomination and the general.
I actually firmly agree with that. I remember when he announced, because he was on Joe Rogan
Yeah,
prior to him announcing, if I'm not mistaken, and then like he announced that he was running for Senate, and I was like, in my mind, I was like, if he can win this and flip Texas to having
yeah,
a blue senator, I was like, he is either going for president or is a shoo-in for VP at that point
yeah,
because like Texas really seems to like, oh, go ahead, Chase. I want to hear your.
Well, I just feel like why we do this every single time where it's like, oh, we get a good candidate in a state, and then it's like, let's send them to the presidency. And I just feel like you can build up a base that's bigger than that because, like, if it's still going to be a competitive race in the future, even if he won, right? So I think taking away some of your soldiers from the Senate just doesn't make sense when you have, I mean, when you have I think a large enough roster of people to I mean, everybody's going to pile in if we do have elections to get the nomination, and it's going to be pretty aggressive. But I think, I mean, I think some people might even argue like Ossoff or people like that. There's all sorts of people who could get in, and I think sometimes like some of these newer figures, we should let them, build up the base and kind of build up the arguments. Um, I kind of see it similar to the AOC argument, right? Like I think there's a good argument for her winning the presidency, but I think there's a better argument for her winning the Senate and getting rid of Chuck Schumer, perhaps. Like I don't know. I think sometimes we play just straight to the presidency, but we need fighters in every single level too. So I don't know. I just think
Yeah, so
sometimes,
I actually I agree with that in large part. I've heard people make the same argument about like Ossoff or like, do we want to lose our senators from Georgia, which is like kind of a hard state to win. I would say Tallarico for me specifically is kind of a different case because even before he announced for Senate, like this guy is, I think, presidential material that would play really
Mhm.
well in a general electorate. And I think also actually there is an aspect to like the more people have to go through climbing the ladder and kind of like working on like a state level and then a federal level at a lower level, it's like they almost get broken down a little bit where like their convictions are tempered, they're kind of taught to like play by the rules, and I kind of want someone who is like, for all of Trump's flaws, I think one thing that people liked about him is like this guy was not molded by the political machine. He just like showed up as himself and ran as himself. And I get worried sometimes where like I actually agree. I think AOC would be really good as senator. She should probably run for Schumer's seat. She could also run for president and win that as well. But like I don't necessarily mind when people kind of skip the line because if they stay at that lower level for too long, it's almost like they are trained to be like a little bit more deferential to the establishment, like a little bit less risk taking. And like, is there some benefit in that? Sure, obviously, like the more you're a veteran, the more you learn the ins and outs. But the downside to that is also that you don't have the same kind of like thinking outside the box. So it's I think it's important to find the balance because you are right. We have to find the balance of like where do we want our people to be more tested at a lower level, and then where do we want to actually fast track someone to the front of the pack while the iron is still sort of hot.
Yeah. I think that reminds me of kind of the argument in Maine right now, where you have Janet Mills versus Graham Plattner, who I think, I think Janet Mills has been an okay governor. I think she probably could win, but I think Graham Plattner, there's just been this just a different cultural moment and some arguments that he's making that I think can appeal to people in a much a broader sense. And I think we don't do ourselves any favors by having the party come down and endorse somebody because I think we should just let them duke it out because
Mhm.
whoever comes out of a competitive primary is probably the stronger candidate overall. And I think, we that the party likes to pick and choose, but most of the time the people that we pick and choose aren't the best. It's like you should let the people and the voters of that state pick who makes sense. So I definitely think there's a lot of arguments. There's not one size fits all. It's
Mhm.
whoever wins those primaries, whoever is the most competitive and has the best argument, I think should take the
I
take it.
totally agree. That's why I want like literally everyone to run for president in 2020. Like get them all in there,
Yeah.
let them all fight each other, and like may the best man or woman win. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of fascinating though because you're kind of seeing this play out in Georgia. What you said, Adam, like where you're kind of protecting like what we had, like the senators, because John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock are 100% shoo-ins for the governor's race, but neither of them are
Mhm.
dropping because they don't want to lose the Senate majority in lose the Senate in for the United States. So like I I'm I feel conflicted about that too because I think that either of them are great candidates for governor, but like because right now there's no leader, there's nobody like that's at the front of the pack for us that
Mhm.
I feel confident that can win. Oh,
Yeah.
geez, you have a
No, 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 no. I
bringing.
agree with you. I don't feel confident that they could win, but
Okay,
they're clearly like Keisha Lance Bottoms definitely has the most notoriety so far in
yeah,
fundraising and stuff like that.
yeah.
But we'll see how the Duncan plays in and all these other candidates who are throwing their hat in the ring. But I haven't really seen anything that's really shifted much of that.
I agree with that. I think Jeff Duncan, he was our lieutenant governor of Georgia, and now he was a Republican, but now he's officially a Democrat. He said like it's much easier to love his neighbor because of it, and like he was a never Trumper, kind of like Brian
Mhm.
Kemp, but Brian Kemp decided to stay Republican. And so with Jeff Duncan, I think that he has the best chance to win in the general election. I just don't think that he can win in the primaries because he is a former Republican, and I think that that
Right.
really does hurt him. But he is going and advocating for Democrats. He actually endorsed a state senator for a position. So like I see that he's putting in the work. I don't know if he's going to be competitive in the primaries, but like I said, if you went to the general election, you can have that you can know with certainty that that's somebody that can reach across the aisle and has worked with Republicans in the past. So like if like analytically, like I feel like myself, I just see him being the best option to be able to
Mhm.
reach across the aisle and be the best one that Republicans I could see actually voting for. But we don't want to talk about Georgia politics here. So sorry about that. That was a little
No
tangent
worries.
to the side.
Yeah.
But I mean, I want to hear your thoughts on like an AOC though running for president because like actually I want to hear both of your thoughts on an AOC running for president because I mean if you look at every major congressional race or every major Senate race like you don't see all of these very progressive candidates winning in the primaries. You don't see them making it to the general election. You don't see like these uh big names going and actually like making a difference in any of the positions that they're running for. Like do you think that someone like an AOC can break the mold and officially win a presidency? Like win because like, AOC, Bernie Sanders, those are the two like most progressive uh races, but AOC is from New York. Like that wasn't an ultra competitive district. And then
Right.
you look at someone like a Bernie Sanders who's been in the game for years and like he's just built a coalition behind him that like is unmatched. So like do you think someone like an AOC could actually make a difference and actually reach people in the middle and get win an election like a presidential election?
So I think like with AOC and even with Bernie, like I always had this big question mark in my head, which is like, what happens when you have a general election where someone is like a self-identified socialist? Like how much of that Red Scare sort of like psychology is still left on the American electorate, and like how much would that impact them, even if like their actual policies are popular and they as people are very popular? That label, I wonder if that would impact like older suburban voters who might turn out typically for Democrats and maybe wouldn't if the person is a socialist. I think AOC would do really well in the primary. And I don't, I want to say she would win a general election, but it's like, it's so hard to know. I mean, you can never take it for granted the Democrat's going to win, even if you think they're like the strongest candidate ever. She could definitely increase her appeal by having kind of like I don't know, maybe like an Andy Bashir as her VP or like someone who is able to more appeal to like moderate Democrats um, and more like traditional voters. But with all these people, honestly, not even AOC, but like even if you have someone who isn't like a self-labeled socialist, which I don't like that Bernie and AOC call themselves socialists because I don't think that they actually are like full-fledged socialists. Like they're kind of like social democrats. I mean, maybe they're more left on certain issues than social democrats,
Yeah.
but um, then again, like you have someone like Trump getting elected who tried to do a coup with the government. So like what the American electorate is like willing to accept is actually, I think, much broader than the sort of like traditional wisdom would tell you. But with AOC and like anyone who has that label on him, there's always that question mark in my head. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that with someone like an AOC, getting a VP like Andy Bashar, but like then you lose that possibility of him running for the Senate in the future. I think it's like the
Mm,
kind of the same situation with Roy
yeah.
Cooper in North Carolina. Like he's going for Senate, he's going for the Senate seat in North Carolina. He was the former governor. I think that he is 100% going to win the Senate seat come this next November. But I think my like and seeing someone like him, I almost feel like someone like him would be a shoo-in for a presidential race because North Carolina is deep red. They have a supermajority in the House
Mm,
and in the Senate, and so like having a Democrat as governor, you have to be able to reach across the aisle in order to pass meaningful legislation. And I think that like someone like Roy Cooper would be very beneficial. But like then it's the same guard. It's not the changing of any guard. Like we're getting the same exact candidates and not these progressive candidates that I feel like have the best chance of winning, or at least have the best have our best interest in mind. And so like I think that that's where like I get a little nervous whenever you throw up an AOC because it's just like are they going to be truly competitive without having that middle ground guy that can go and back them up.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. And I think there's also just like we do have to keep track of the broader picture and like if we want to win back power, it's not just winning back the presidency, it's winning back big Senate majorities, which is like kind of hard to do in the modern era. But like
Yeah.
we need to have some kind of plan to be able to I mean, I think we should lower the number for the filibuster. I think it's like ridiculous that you need 60 votes to get like anything done. And
Yeah.
once the reconciliation bill is gone, we're just, I guess, virtue signaling on Twitter for the next year. I would like to see the filibuster lowered to maybe like 53. I think that's like fair, 54, something like that.
Yeah.
I could even see an argument for just getting rid of it wholesale. But like, yeah, we do need to keep in mind. I agree that like we don't just want to put in all our cards on the presidency and then forego potentially winning elections in these purple states or even maybe red states like Kentucky where you have Bashir. Um, we need to because when Obama won in 08, and then he came in 09, like we had Democratic senators from like states that are now considered very, very red states. And we need to be able to go back to that. That doesn't mean you actually sell out your principles, but you maybe message in a different way and you focus on like turning out different electorates or different parts of the electorate. And that does involve saying, like, okay, this candidate might win the general election for presidency, but also they're the only Democrat that can win the Senate in the state. And therefore, we should maybe prioritize the Senate race over the presidency for them.
Yeah. 100%. Um, all right. Do you know who Marjorie Taylor Greene is?
Unfortunately, I do.
Both of us are from Georgia. We understand. Okay.
Yeah.
He puts a really bad name on us. Have you kind of seen her tone shift over the past couple months in terms of government shutdown, in terms of the
Gaza.
in Gaza, yeah, situation? Like, where do you is this odd to you? Because like when I see what she's doing, I don't know if it's because her district has been gerrymandered to where it's a little more competitive. So now she's kind of
Mhm.
doing a tone shift and she's just grifting, or maybe she's seen the light. Like, what do you think this is from someone like MTG?
It's hard to know. Like, I would hesitate to get into the head of someone like that because I don't know what is ever going on in her head. But I think that, I mean, she's trying to carve out, I think, a lane for herself, which is less MAGA and more populist, which like there's a huge overlap between the MAGA base and the populist base, but like there are some people who are more, I guess, principled populists who I guess would um say that they, want healthcare for the working class and these sorts of things, which I guess maybe Trump would never say, even though he has that populist aesthetic to him.
Yeah.
So I wonder if Marjorie Taylor Greene is trying to think kind of like beyond the MAGA era, like what is my lane going to be? And like, can I kind of like carve out an audience for myself that is a little bit broader when, you've seen this happen kind of with like Nick Fuentes, where you have people on the right who start talking a lot about Gaza and they kind of are able to expand their audience to some people who maybe don't know them for anything outside of that. So, like, I'll see a lot of people that are just kind of like normies. They'll be like liking a Nick Fuentes clip of him saying, like, what's happening in Gaza is a genocide. And they're like, oh, this guy is like really smart and really well spoken. And I'm like, yeah, that's because that's all you've seen of him.
Yeah.
When you see the other stuff he believes, then you maybe, are a little bit more hesitant to support him. I think Marjorie is trying to do the same thing where she's like, if I say the right things about the ACA and about Gaza, which are like 80-20 issues right now in this country,
Yeah.
then I do kind of like bring people into the fold who maybe won't know about the Jewish space laser stuff and maybe they'll like me.
I've always thought, like, especially with the Israel thing, I don't know if she's on the right side of history for this because she actually cares or because she's just anti-Semitic. Because, like,
Right.
I mean, you're right about the Jewish space lasers, and then when COVID hit, she compared like the Nazi concentration camps to like having to wear masks and
Yeah.
not the passports, but the
The vaccine
vaccine
cards or yeah.
cards. Yeah. So like, I don't know. It just when she started talking about that, I don't know if she's actually doing this because she truly like cares about the issues that are going on with
Mhm.
the Palestine Israel issues, or if it's because she actually is just anti-Semitic and it's just like this is a way for me to hate Jews without it
Yeah.
being bad, you know?
It's appealing to the young Republican base, which is increasingly like the Nick Fuentes crowd, especially now that his main competition in Charlie Kirk is kind of gone. I think we're going to see like Republicans that are under the age of 30 right now, when they are kind of like in their middle ages and older ages, we're going to see a Republican Party that is probably shifting uh, towards an anti Israel direction, but maybe for the wrong reasons, because a lot of these people are like extremely, extremely anti-Semitic, which it's so
Yeah.
crazy how commonplace it's become.
I mean, you saw the text messages
Yeah,
published by Politico the other day. I mean, seeing them talking about concentration camps and gas
yeah,
chambers and showers and then praising Hitler. I'm just like, and these are like, and they say like, oh yeah, these are just like stupid kids making stupid jokes. It's like, I don't remember being like 18, 19 years old and saying anything like, get them in the gas chambers. But also,
yeah,
some of them are like 30 years old. One of them
yeah,
is like a representative. I was like, are we sure that these are just the young kids? Like these are grown men, like older than us.
yeah,
You have to be more forgiving, Royland. You have to understand where they're coming from. You should listen to JD, like
yeah,
why fault them? Like I do think it's like people either say like why fault them or they go to this, well, Jay Jones said that he wants kids to die and like as the AG, and I'm like, okay, that's messed up too. Like I don't
right.
know, I just feel like it's like crazy that they sit there and they bring up somebody else or they don't actually acknowledge it, and it's like what part of this group chat is actually that surprising though?
Yeah.
Like that's the real part. Like it was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, and I do think it shows how bad the conversations were when the young Republicans didn't just like, oh, whatever, these are just people saying stuff. It's like most Republicans had to respond and say, this is wrong, like this is not how you're supposed to talk. And I think the mere fact that they actually had to comment on it also indicates that the culture is a little different. It's shifted. Like it's no longer just you get to say whatever and the argument stands. It's like people are actually like, no, I don't care one way or the other, party wise. I don't like people when they say that.
Yeah, and a
Um,
lot of it's become this weird tribalism where I don't know if you guys know Adam Mockler. He was on a stage the other day with one of the heads of Turning Point, and he brings up the Politico story, and he's like, "Obviously, you can condemn this, right?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, we can talk about it." He's like, "Can you condemn it though?" And he's like, "We can discuss it." And it's like they're so afraid to just make one tiny concession and say we were in the wrong. Like people on our side are actually not great people, but they're so they're like salivating, ready to label everyone on the left a domestic terrorist, but then they're so afraid to even make the tiniest criticism of people on their own side.
Okay. I don't know how you feel about Destiny, but he has been preaching this for the past
Yeah.
like ever since Charlie Kirk was killed. I've been listening to Destiny for the past month because I mean I've always listened to Destiny for a while. Like I like to listen to the major creators in the
Yeah.
space.
Yeah. Same.
But like especially what Destiny has been saying, like refusing to condemn violence because he's like I already have. I've never condoned any behavior like this. It's Republicans that refuse to turn down the temperature. Immediately
Yeah.
after Charlie Kirk's assassination, Trump went on to Fox News and said like, the people on the left are the ones that are really causing these issues, and then the people on the right are just the reason that there's agitators on the right is because they're getting upset because of all the crime and stuff like that. Making excuses for violence on the right, which it's so frustrating to see because I'm like the president, especially after the Melissa Hortman shooting,
Hmm.
killing. Uh, Donald Trump was asked, he was like, "Are you going to reach out to Tim Walz because she was a lawmaker in Minnesota?" And he's like, "I'm not going to reach out to that guy is crazy," or something along those lines. I'm just
Right.
like, that's the kind of rhetoric that we're still getting from someone like Donald Trump. And then all of a sudden, he gets this shocked Pikachu face as soon as Kirk gets assassinated. He's like, why is there so much violence? And I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's baffling and it hurts me so much. But I think I think Destiny has done the best job at explaining that and just being like, listen, like nobody on the right is going to take any concessions. Like because as soon as they say like, oh, we need to condemn violence on our side, then that means like they're afraid that people on the left are going to run with it because they're just like every time somebody on the left condemns it, they're like, you know what? Barack Obama said like everybody needs to turn down the temperature. So he is admitting that there's violence on the left.
Yeah. I have mixed opinions on Destiny. I used to really like him back in the day, and then he kind of started losing me with his takes on Gaza, especially. Like he was just fully in the wrong on that. And then obviously he's had some personal situations, which I'm like, oh, this is not great actually. I've had a couple opportunities to work with him, and I was like, I think I'm good actually. But when it comes specifically to like fighting MAGA, I'm gonna give credit where it's due. He's very good at debating MAGA, and he's one of the best on the left at doing it. I
Yeah.
will say that when he does the thing of like, I won't condemn it till Trump condemns it, I feel where he's coming from. Like I get that anger, but I think sometimes to like a normie audience, it might not come off the best when he says basically like, "Oh, you won't condemn violence, I won't condemn it either." What I find, what I try to do personally, and this comes down to like a difference in tactics. I think that there's room for all of these different approaches where some people are like a little bit more brutal, some are like a little bit more charitable. I think all that is like part of a broad strategy. But like what I would like to do is say, I will condemn it, but you won't condemn it. And that shows the difference between you and me is to actually full throatedly say, like, yeah, that AG guy in Virginia, disgusting. Democrats probably should try to replace him if it's possible. I don't know how it actually works. But, notice how I can say that and you can't say that about Trump, right? Like you have Trump devotion syndrome. These people talk about TDS. And I think it's important to flip it back around on them because, they try to normalize the fact that they are just completely brainwashed, complete sycophants for Trump. They have so many double standards, and like I don't want the left to kind of like lose ourselves in the pursuit of trying to stop them.
Yeah.
I do get the inclination to be like, you're asking a streamer to condemn this and not the president of the United States. Like, where exactly are your standards? But then I would take it a step further and say, like, okay, I as the streamer will condemn it, and the president won't. So, like, look at how low the president is, that he's like being held to a lower standard than a content creator.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he said on Piers Morgan. He's like,
Yeah,
I'm a YouTuber. Like,
right.
it's like, why is this incumbent upon me in order to do that? You mentioned the Israel Gaza stuff. I kind of want to hear your opinion on the current ceasefire, or I guess the concepts of a ceasefire. Don't exactly
Yeah.
what exactly, guys. It's a 20-point plan, 21-point plan. I read a couple of the points, and I guess I'm a little hesitant to believe anything because like Donald Trump originally was the one that brokered the Abraham Accords, and look what that did. That did
Right.
absolutely nothing. That completely left out Hamas and then let tensions boil over to the point where October 7th happened, and now all of a sudden, he's back in office. So he basically kicked the can down the road. Because like this that wasn't even a peace agreement for any like conflicting countries. Like that was I
Yeah.
was very frustrated that he was just like, I created the Abraham Accords. I'm just like, okay, well, that didn't actually solve anything. That was like Middle Eastern Muslim countries that were already getting along, like Saudi Arabia, and so yeah. Anyways, what are your thoughts? Do you think that this peace plan is actually going to work? Do you feel like Donald Trump deserves credit for any of this? Because like he was the one originally in office when the Abraham Accords were put in place. Like
Mm-hmm.
now all of a sudden he's having to put something else back in place, and whether it actually sticks, who knows? What are your thoughts on this?
Man, this is such an interesting topic because, like, does Trump deserve credit is kind of a complicated question in that I think, like, this type of thing, like, the hostage and, both sides exchanging hostages, that was like bound to happen. I think at some point, like, I
Yeah,
don't know that we can confidently say that if Kamala Harris wins the election, that we don't have some kind of similar temporary ceasefire and hostage swap somewhere in Q4 2025 or Q1 2026. Like, I would like to think that this probably was not going to continue for like the next 4 years straight, and that Trump came in and he was like, I'm going to save the world or whatever.
yeah,
With that being said, like, does he deserve some baseline of credit for, I guess, facilitating it? It's like, I guess that's fine. Sure. It's not actually like a huge accomplishment for Trump specifically. I think maybe like you can say Steve Witkoff or Marco Rubio or like whoever these emissaries are that are going back and forth. But even there, it's like the bar is so low that we're supposed to give Trump credit for, I guess, a temporary cessation of people shooting each other and bombing each other. But like at the end of the day, like the majority of Gaza is like destroyed. And when you look at like some of these Lancet estimates, like I'm assuming that like the total death toll in terms of like excess deaths because of what Israel's done is going to be approaching like a 250,000 people, maybe more, when you take into account like people that died from people that had like cancer or some other chronic illness that they could not get treatment for because there were people with like shrapnel in them instead in the hospital, right? So like this has decimated the Palestinian population. It has undoubtedly been a genocide, and like just getting Israel to temporarily stop the genocide doesn't actually, I think, move us in a positive direction. It just stops us from moving in a more negative direction. So I'm fine to say I'm happy that Trump was able to get that to stop temporarily, but if he wants actual credit and actual kudos for that, we need to see at the very least a plan to reconstruct Gaza, give these people actual livable infrastructure, clean water, education, roads, and bridges that aren't going to collapse on them. And then also, like, this is never going to happen under Trump or honestly anyone, but like, just saying that, okay, we're going to stop shooting and we're going to have exchange of hostages and all this stuff says nothing to like, okay, are we going to hold people accountable for what they've done over the last 2 years? Like, there needs to be actual consequences for this. And I fear that because it's been so bad for the last 2 years, that the standards we have set for what qualifies as resolving this conflict are like disgustingly low, right? Like, when's the last time you heard someone talk about a plan for a Palestinian state? That sounds like so far away compared to where we are now.
Yeah.
But if you want to ask me, like, what are the actual metrics for success? I would say it's rebuilding Gaza, putting a path in place for an actual sovereign Palestinian state with self determination, ending the Israeli occupation, and then holding war criminals accountable for their war crimes. But that feels like so like this feels like a fantasy to even say that would happen.
Yeah, I mean, considering that Netanyahu has complete control and unbridled, he's I after we bombed Iran ourselves and then seeing what he did in Qatar, like I've just kind of noticed that like Netanyahu has like no leash in terms of what he's allowed to do to any other country. And Donald Trump is completely allowed everything to happen, whether he agrees with it or not. Because I mean, immediately after the Qatar bombing, he called Qatar and said, like, I
Mm-hmm.
apologize, like this was not supposed to happen, but there were Hamas members here. So like, and just seeing that whole like back and forth of like, Netanyahu does something and then Trump either apologizes or said like this was needed. It just seemed like there was just this unbridled control that Netanyahu had over Donald Trump. And I don't understand why. Like, do you do you know why? Do you have an idea on why he has this kind of control over him?
I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, it seems like Netanyahu also is just like a very strong-willed person. Like, if he wants something, he will lie to your face. He will make supposed peace agreements in bad faith, like he did even during Clinton, where I don't know if you've seen this like leaked video of him talking to his family, and he was like, "Oh, the Americans are like the easiest people in the world to just influence and control." And like, yeah, when I agreed to say that I wouldn't expand military installations, I actually was like, what I meant by military installations was like different than what Clinton thought I meant. So actually, I'm going to expend them anyway, but I'm just going to call it something else. Like, this guy is like such a bad faith actor
Yeah.
who is set on this idea of like establishing a greater Israel. And like, it's part of his fundamental worldview that the Palestinian people should never have self determination and that their mere existence represents some kind of existential threat to like the Zionist project that he believes in. So I think part of it is that like Netanyahu is like, I don't want to say evil genius, but like he's very good at getting what he wants and operating in bad faith ways and like telling half truths to kind of like get people along for a little bit, then backstabbing them. Like, he's a sophisticated operator. So I think part of it is just that. And then part of it also is like, it's funny people say like, oh, Trump is being tough on Netanyahu and he's like actually telling him like this is what you have to do. But that's all rhetoric, right? Because when push comes to shove, Trump would never actually like cease sending weapons to Israel, or like even the most Trump will say is like, you have two countries fighting that don't know what the fuck they're doing, and everyone's like, oh my god, he just destroyed Netanyahu because he said the F word apparently. But
Yeah.
in everything substantive, the Republican orthodoxy is still alive and well, which is that we are going to be so pro-Israel that we even managed to make Biden look marginally better. Like, that's how far extreme we're going to go, which is a tough thing to do because Biden also botched that horribly. But like, Trump ended the sanctions against West Bank settlers that Biden had put in place. He stopped, what use is it to condemn expansions of settlements? Maybe not much, but it's better than supporting the expansions of West Bank settlements, as kind of MAGA has been doing, and having the ambassador to Israel be Mike Huckabee, who is like genuinely like mashed potatoes for brain, thinks the rapture is coming, and like we need to be siding with people in what do they call the West Bank and Gaza? They have these other names for it. I'm
Chase.
like blanking on it.
Judea and Samaria
Judea and
usually,
Samaria. Yeah, like these
which,
people are so
yeah,
married to this idea.
I mean, growing up evangelical, I mean, it's a deep conversation about like, and look, the Bible does talk about like those who turn against Israel, there's a conversation around that. But I think it's strange to make a man-made state
Mhm.
into a work of God or like some
Right.
sort of, it's a man-created political state. And I think people can have their opinions and values or whatever they have, but I think this just, complete siding with Israel kind of to me isn't as pro-Christian as people would think because, like look at the Palestinian Christians who, are under the threat of Israel or even, when you look at, I mean, the utter occupation that they have overall. Like, I mean, this isn't, we so often in this conversation we talk about October 7th, but it's like been since the 40s when the creation of Israel, right? And, you know, I think sometimes we get too caught up in some of those things because look, every single state's creation is usually not pretty. So like Israel's not an exception to that. But I do think there's just this, capitulation to Israel at any cost. And, we're getting into, I think, even more kind of strange dynamics because now Qatar is basically a Article 5 protected country if you really want to look at it, right? Like any attack against Qatar is an attack against us. So I don't know, it's an interesting development the way these kind of strange alliances are all forming there. Because I also think the populations of these Muslim countries, that Saudi Arabia and all that, they don't necessarily support Israel. But the
Mhm.
Saudi government, most of the governments in Qatar and things like that, they've been working with the Israelis behind for a long time. And I think they're finally ready to finalize it. And Trump is ready to kind of cooperate with them to do whatever they need for that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that you bring up, where there's like this disconnect between in the Middle East, the heads of state and the actual populations of those countries who are like a lot more like genuinely pro-Palestine, whereas like a lot of these world leaders use it as like an aesthetic to pacify their people that like they rule over. And I'm forgetting where this saying came from, but it was someone involved in geopolitics that was saying like when you're negotiating with like Middle Eastern leaders, what they say to you in private is never true, and what they say in public is actually what's true, because ultimately they have to, even in these authoritarian countries, to some extent they have to placate and play to these anti-Zionist, pro-Palestine beliefs, even if they personally are like, actually we stand to benefit a lot financially from just joining the Abraham Accords. And like we had talks of Saudi normalizing with Israel right before October
Mhm.
7th happened. I think that there is an issue where there are so many different groups that it's hard to get like, if you want to address this issue, you need like a lot of coordination between like different state actors and different populations and like humanitarian groups. And it's like everyone involved here has some, like they have like 10 different reasons for doing what they're doing. So like for Saudi and Iran, this is like kind of part of their proxy war. For the US, it's also about like suppressing Iran to some extent and Iran's proxy groups. Then for Israel, it's about establishing this concept of greater Israel, which encompasses the Golan Heights, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip. And that's why it's I think kind of hard to be optimistic here, because there's there's so few good faith actors who are genuinely just like, hey, can we hold people accountable for war crimes and have self-determination for the Palestinian people? It's like in foreign policy circles, that's considered kind of like corny and naive, and you have to have this like super high-minded realpolitik approach, which oftentimes leaves actual civilians suffering the consequences.
Yeah.
Chase, you got any more questions for him?
I mean, no, I mean, I think he was spot on with that and kind of those conversations. I'd say, I mean, did you have anything else besides Gaza that you wanted to cover or ask about?
I mean, just the biggest thing to me right now is the rise of like authoritarianism and like the real risks that we are not going to have free and fair elections in 2026 and 2028. This is an executive order that I try to point out to like literally everyone I talk to, but there's an executive order that was drafted at the end of 2020 by the Trump administration, which lays out like a very specific plan to steal elections, which basically says that Iran hacked Dominion voting systems, and therefore the Secretary of Defense has to federalize the National Guard and go in to seize the voting machines so that we can analyze the voting machines and tell you guys what are the real results, because the hackers changed it to help the radical left win. And the only reason Trump never signed that executive order in his first term is that back then his DHS people, his DOJ people, his cybersecurity people, they would have said, no, we're actually not going to do this. Now all those people that would say no have been replaced by complete loyalists. And I'm worried, like, if they have the plan written down, like, why would they not put in place this plan that they wrote? And even with ICE, like, you saw Steve Bannon a few weeks ago saying, oh, you're damn right we're going to have ICE agents at polling places. Like, we are going to do that. And when you see ICE now detaining citizens and then releasing them a day or two later, you could very easily have people that like look the wrong way or speak the wrong way getting detained at polling places, and then they get released right after polls close. They can no longer vote anymore. So they're literally removing people from the electorate. You have you talked about the Voting Rights Act. Like, if they're able to actually add more red seats to make it like unwinnable for Democrats, and then if both of those things, rigging it up front, doesn't work, then if the upfront rigging doesn't work, then they come in with the troops to actually just seize voting machines and tell us, actually, we checked the results and Republicans won, actually. So this is something that I'm worried that like no one is planning for or taking seriously, and it's like barreling towards us at full speed.
Adam, that is such a great point. And I think that after January 6th, like people talk about the violence that happened that day, but they don't even pay attention to what Trump was saying that day, what Trump was
Right.
trying to get to happen that day. Like he submitted seven fake slate of electors in order to overturn the 2020 election. I mean, he literally went, instead of getting the certificate of ascertainment by the governor, by the Secretary of State, getting it voted on by the General Assembly, he went and submitted his own slate of electors and then tried to get the election overturned that way. The only reason that that didn't work was because Mike Pence said that he's only overseeing. And JD Vance himself also said that if that were to happen with him, that he would go and certify the elector. And nobody knows what's going to happen. I mean, even in the Eastman memos, you saw like that it would probably go to court and take a couple of months in order to be actually like played out so that there would be a determination on who the president is. But like that's exactly where we are right now. A person who openly said that he would go and overturn the election or submit the fake electors is now VP and will be over that process.
Yeah, and the fact that MAGA says that we're fear mongering when we say stuff like that is so ridiculous to me, because it's like there's two aspects to doing anything. One is like intent and one is means. And like the intent with Trump has always been there. Like he has said loud and clear, I intend to steal elections. The thing he was lacking in 2020 was the means to do so. He now has the means handily. And like people forget, this guy was indicted for doing an attempted coup of the U.S. government. Like he was actually indicted for this. Like there were criminal acts that were
Yeah.
engaged in for the purposes of changing the winner of the election. And somehow this guy won again in 2024, and people don't see that he's the writing's on the wall and what he wants to do here. And it's so disturbing because, if we talk to anyone who's a Trump supporter the day before the 2024 election and we said to them, hey, Trump's going to deploy the National Guard to blue states. Trump's going to say we should arrest the governor of Illinois. The Trump administration is going to arrest people for lawful, constitutionally protected pro Palestinian speech. They would laugh in your face and run 20 news cycles on the Daily Wire and Fox News about Trump derangement syndrome. They're fear mongering. Trump would never do this. When they bring up these baseless conspiracy theories, they're inciting violence against the president. The reason Trump was shot in Butler is because people like you are saying he's going to invade Illinois. And then look what happens. He invades Illinois and they defend it. So everything that they now deny, they will be defending in a few months. And it's the same thing for stealing elections.
Yeah, it's insane to me. And I wanted to get back to your point about like them detaining immigrants. A couple months ago, since I live in DC, obviously they deployed the National Guard, which is insane to me, just walking and seeing all of these individuals in army gear with these guns walking around, especially in the place where I live. I live in DuPont Circle. Like I'm in a very
Mm-hmm.
safe area. There's no need for the National Guard here. And there's people with these huge weapons just walking around for absolutely no reason. Anyways, I digress. So a couple months ago, I was walking to go and get my hair cut, and there was a lot of Hispanic people generally are food delivery people around here, and so like you'll see them on bikes delivering food with like these big packs on the back of their bikes. There was one riding on the sidewalk across the street, and all of a sudden, an unmarked car decided to pull over on the other side of the road, block all of the traffic, get two ICE agents who had their faces covered, get out and detain this guy. And they detain him for over an hour while I was getting my haircut. Like I was watching the entire thing while I was getting my haircut. And then I immediately, like when I was done, I continue to watch it. They detain this guy, ask him a series of questions. They have somebody else come. I don't know exactly who it was. I guess it was like some kind of vehicle to transport him in order if they needed to. An hour goes by, they're continuing to ask him questions, and then they finally release him, and he's free to go. This man didn't have any priors. I guess he didn't have anything. There was no reason to detain him other than he looked like an immigrant. He gets pulled over, and I'm
Yeah.
like how I saw this with my own eyes. I saw this live. I don't think that people are realizing like just how terrifying that is when someone is getting detained when he just looks Hispanic. That's it.
Yeah. And with ICE specifically, I think even people on the left are not fully understanding how bad it's getting because there was reporting that was coming out from within ICE, like whistleblowers in ICE when Trump first came into office, that were saying like for as long as we've been working here, we've been told that you're supposed to prioritize detaining actual criminals. And we're being told to like go after literally random people
Yeah.
at immigration courthouses, at Home Depots and 7-Elevens. And they even have a data sharing agreement with the IRS. So they're specifically targeting people who pay taxes, which is like such a backwards way of enforcing anything related to immigration. And what you saw when Trump came in is like they actually did like a lot of purging of ICE officers who were like more career ICE people and then replacing them with Trump loyalists to the point where like I don't know if you guys have seen the pictures of like there are ICE agents that wear like a golden pin of Trump's face. And it's really, really weird. Like some of these sort of like foot soldiers or like lower level people at executive branch agencies, they were fired in mass in like January, February, March, and they were just quietly replaced by like hundreds and hundreds of like turning point people, proud boys, like actual, in some cases, white supremacists, I'm sure. And when we even talk about now, like, why aren't they following the law? Because they follow Trump. Like, they don't give a fuck about the law. You have a Black Hawk helicopter showing up to an apartment complex in Chicago with flashbangs and zip tying American citizens. Like, and again, this goes back to the gaslighting by MAGA. When these deportations first started, they were like, listen, it's not like they're going after citizens or something. They are going after citizens now, and they just defend it. So the the way that we are living in the midst of authoritarianism and there's still this denial and this idea of like, oh, it could never actually happen here. I was talking to my friends about this, and they're kind of apolitical. And the sense that I get from apolitical people is they understand like, yeah, stuff is bad. But it was also kind of bad before, but like we'll just win the next election, no big deal. And then when you tell them, actually, no, we might not have an election, then they're like, wait, what? Like I didn't realize it was like that bad. Like we're at that level now. Um, and I worry that people are going to get the wake up call when it's too late. Where even I think you're going to see we're going to get to a point with this where something happens that is so blatant and so hard to deny that even some Republicans are going to say, "Oops, like we were on the wrong side here. This is like really bad." Like what one place I could see that happening is like if midterms roll around and you do see ICE and National Guard interfering with elections, and then you see courts telling Trump this is not allowed, and Trump says sucks for you. I'm going to do it anyways. I think when something like that happens, then we are going to see like a lot of normies saying, wait, like this is actually like a lot worse than we thought. And the issue with authoritarianism is once it becomes undeniable, it's also too late to stop it. You have to be able to stop it when there's like still some people that are defending it and saying this isn't authoritarian. Once it becomes impossible to say this is not authoritarian, authoritarianism has already won. That's kind of the scary part.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like January 6th was exactly that. I mean, we not only
Yeah.
saw the fake electors, but like we also saw violence and people storming the Capitol. But yeah, and we saw a ton of Republicans start to try to distance themselves. And then
They
I
were
guess
ready to impeach him actually in the Senate. They're ready to convict him.
I know I cannot.
It's so crazy.
McConnell, I that is why I will always hate McConnell. He
Yeah.
himself even said he was like, we would impeach him, but he had already lost the election, and he thought that he would never be eligible. He was never going to win another primary again. And lo and behold, 4 years later, he did exactly that.
Wins the popular vote in the general election. Ben Shapiro was calling it the worst thing to happen in this country since 9/11.
Yeah, I know.
It's
And he called it an insurrection himself the day that it
yeah.
happened. He called it an insurrection, and now he's going and defending it. I I just hate like how and like one thing about Ben Shapiro. I know that you actually got to debate him on wasn't it immigration, if I'm not mistaken?
It was no, it was on it was actually on authoritarianism and like Trump replacing civil service protections with like loyalists and stuff.
That's
Yeah.
right. But I just I think that for the most part, in a lot of things, Ben Shapiro himself is like pretty good faith. But like I've just seen him start in the past couple of years, or at least
Yeah.
before he was good faith, but like these past couple of years, it just seems like he's trying to pander to the base because like I think people are starting to turn on him. I don't know if it's because, he is Jewish and like, there's already this hate in the Republican Party for anybody that is Jewish. But like I've kind of seen like a turn away from the Ben Shapiro's because I have a
He
lot of
sold his soul to MAGA, and I hate him more than any other right wing commentator because when I see someone on the right who knows better and still aligns with Trump,
yeah.
I'm like, oh, you're a bad person. Like
Yeah.
you're just chasing after power, I guess, or clout or name recognition. The same goes, by the way, for Vivek Ramaswamy and JD Vance. Like these are both intelligent people, like that went to Ivy League law schools, and if you hear them talking pre-Trump, like I disagree with them, but like I actually went through and I listened to the audiobook for Vivek. I think it's called like Woke Inc. or whatever. And like while he's wrong, he's very, very intelligent, thinks these things through, and definitely knows better when he sees Trump being an authoritarian. So when he then aligns himself with Trump, I'm like, keep this guy away from power because he is willing to sell out all of his principles if it means getting into like a high ranking position. And like I mean, like ultimately, what we're seeing happening here is that um, Stephen Miller, Russ Vought, Curtis Yarvin, and Peter Thiel, these four people are actually kind of shaping the direction of the country, and they have taken hostage like every other right leaning person who just like turns their brain off and is like, yes, sir, whatever you say, we're going to parrot that on our media shows. And like people like Ben Shapiro, like, I hope he has trouble sleeping at night, especially if it gets worse, because like the road to authoritarianism is paved with weak conservatives. Like these rhino Republicans are supposed to be the bulwark against Trump even winning a primary, let alone winning the general election. And the way that they have fallen in line, we're like, when Trump nationalizes 10% of Intel, this is what Republicans have been crying that Obama was going to do, or Biden was going to do, or Bernie was going to do. They
Yeah.
never did it. Trump does it, and Shapiro complains about it for one day on his show, and then he goes back to talking about the radical left who killed Charlie Kirk. So it's like these people have shifted the goalpost so far that they've let us off a cliff.
Yeah, the only time that I've actually seen like any real criticism towards Trump from Ben Shapiro this year has been regarding the tariffs. I think like
Yeah,
as he announced the mass tariffs, I saw him do an hour long, and like I was very appreciative of that because like I don't think people realize just how impactful those tariffs were. Like other than people that were already invested in the stock market, which I am invested in the stock market, and it was brutal to
mm-hmm.
watch because I have a lot of money in the stock market. And on April, in April, I saw everything go down and turn red. And I was like, okay, I thought Trump was supposed to be good for the stock market, but
Yeah,
neither here nor there. But yeah, him being able to speak about the tariffs and how, just because we are in a deficit with a country doesn't mean that's a bad thing, right? Like
yeah,
time that we did have a surplus in the United States and not a deficit with another country was also during the Great Depression, and like that wasn't a good thing. And like seeing these blanket tariffs against even some of our own partners,
it
and
makes no sense.
yeah, it made absolutely no sense to me. It was just so frustrating to watch everything that he was doing with announcing these blanket tariffs because I'm like the economy is running well, inflation is starting to come down. Thank Joe Biden for that. And then all of a sudden he's like I want to bring back American manufacturing. Just like why would you want to bring back manufacturing? Like, the parts being built in places like China, like India, that's okay. Like we have the assembly lines here and we're
Right,
focusing on more of like the coding and things like that here in the United States, that's where we want to be. We don't want to do like the minuscule work where we're working on assembly lines. Like
right.
nobody wants to be a coal miner. People want to do stuff with coal, but like nobody wants to go into the mines and
And the issue also is like I think it's fine to say you want to have like industrial policy to have like more we're building more in America. Like in terms of infrastructure, I think it's a good idea. But the issue is like tariffs make it more expensive to build in America because like a third of the materials that we import, like the intermediate goods that are used to build like final goods, those are imported. Those are also tariff now. So domestic producers have their costs increasing. And then you also have like the insane risks of, and this is so crazy too. You talked about like trade deficits. He tariffed Australia and the UK, who we have trade surpluses with. So
Surpluses
like
with,
it wasn't
yes,
even like we were
yes.
just targeting countries with trade deficits. And then like the final point there is like if this continues, we're gonna see stagflation. Like we're seeing a weaker labor market,
Yep.
but also higher prices, which
Rising
is
inflation.
like
Yes.
it's hard to accomplish that. Like you have to have really bad economic policy to accomplish that.
Yeah, I exactly. Like we and also we outperformed every G7 and G20 country in terms of GDP and in terms of inflation. I mean, other than Japan, but they've been in stagflation and they're
Right.
below. But I mean, we have managed to outperform all of those other countries, and yet Donald Trump still comes in and says like we're being taken advantage of when the reality is we're not being taken advantage of. We can't go and get a country like Tanzania that has the GDP of like $1,000 per person compared to the United States and get them to have a surplus with us. Like they would have to start importing millions, if not billions of dollars worth of goods. Like we couldn't do that with those countries. It's like unless if they have a surplus with us, then or if we have a deficit with them and they have a surplus with us, we're going to implement these tariffs. I'm just like some of these countries can't afford to have these
Yeah.
to
It's crazy how little understanding these people have of like very, very basic econ. Like I have an econ degree, but we learned this in like our intro to macro class and micro as well, like comparative advantage. Like some countries can produce certain things cheaper, we can produce other things cheaper. So then
yeah.
we trade with them. Like it's like so basic, but even straightforward economics is just like this administration, I don't know where they get their ideas from. Like genuinely, I don't understand where Trump comes up with this stuff because even conservative economists, actually, they probably more than left economists would say like, oh, this is like a distortionary tax that raises the cost of production, raises the cost for consumers.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean we're now facing the consequences of that, right? Like you said that Jerome Powell did himself say that we are going to be cutting interest rate, probably going to be cutting our interest rates again because of a weakening labor market, even though we've seen inflation now, surpass 3% again, and we saw a decline in GDP for the first quarter too, and I'm just like, or was it the first quarter or second? Yeah, it was the first quarter, and like what exactly is the third quarter going to look like? Are we even going to be able to know in time in order to make like, proper decisions? Like there's just so many things. And now all of a sudden he's escalating the trade war with China again with some tweets. And then you see the stock market react. And I don't know. I think that he's trying these bully tactics that, are not working because like I have not seen any comprehensive trade deals created. Like he talked
Actually, I'll push back on that. I'll say they're working for him and his cronies who are profiting off of it in the sense that when you talk about him tweeting about the tariffs on China, I don't know if you saw that there was like
about
someone shorted Bitcoin
Bitcoin.
and
Yeah.
they cashed out 1 minute before he tweeted this and the market crashed. It's so clear that people that are either in his family or in his administration are being given heads up on when he's going to make these announcements. And they're so clearly manipulating the market. And it's so shameless. I mean, Trump coin was shameless. The Qatari jet was shameless. The fact that the top holders of Trump coin get invited to the White House for like a luxury dinner, it's like cartoonishly corrupt. And it's just like, we don't even talk about it because there's troops in the streets. It's like there's so much going wrong that it's like easy to forget this stuff, which in and of itself, this one scandal would destroy any other president. But it's just like an average day at the office for Trump, I guess.
There's just been one thing after another. I mean, you look at the signal chat would have gotten any kind
Yeah.
of Secretary of Defense removed. RFK has been pushing for polio vaccine to be removed from
Oh my
cycle.
God. Yeah. Public health. I even forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing an uptick in measles. Measles was effectively eradicated in the early 2000s, and now all of a sudden we're having outbreaks in Texas, Georgia, and California. There was a case of the plague in California. We're seeing rubella. I mean, like, there's just so many, and the vaccine hesitancy also behind all of this is just so frustrating to
Even
see.
though Trump just got his booster a few days ago for
Trump got
COVID.
his booster for the COVID shot.
Yeah. It's so crazy. And like with public health specifically, it's so annoying. Like one thing I don't even see people talking about is like under RFK Jr., they are actually editing the results of studies. And they're
Yes.
like there was a nutrition researcher named Kevin Hall who is like doing groundbreaking research in like processed foods and weight gain, like very, very important research. And a media organization reached out to him to say, hey, can we interview you about this research? And basically, RFK's administration said, you have to send your answers through us. Like whatever questions they ask you, send your answers to us, then we'll send them to the media. And they actually edited his responses. Like they straight up just changed what he said, and they changed the results of the experiments. And then he resigned. He was like, if you guys are gonna like destroy my research and like not even let me speak freely, this is no longer public health. And like I was on Jubilee a couple weeks ago, and I was like arguing with this one guy, and he was saying, oh, they just want people to be like careful with Tylenol usage and like just don't overuse it, like just proceed with caution. And I was like, you're so delusional if you think that they're engaging in public health in good faith with like a nuanced understanding, right? Because Trump said fight like hell not to take Tylenol. And like newsflash to these people, doctors already tell pregnant women proceed with caution when you take medication, including Tylenol. That was already the norm, right? That's not what they said. They said that it causes autism for sure, and that you should fight like hell not to take it, right? So what we're seeing with our public health apparatus is they come in with a predetermined narrative, and anything that doesn't align with that narrative is either deleted, like they're deleting studies off these websites, or they're changing the results and firing or demoting these researchers. And then MAGA has the audacity to say that they just want us to like be careful with Tylenol. It's like that's not even what they're saying. They're so extreme and so brutal with what they do to these career scientists, just destroying their careers.
I know. And then they elected the new head of CDC a couple months ago, and then not more than like a month later, she was removed. And
Yep.
I'm just like, if you're an elected official, like if the Senate had to go and confirm you, and then you're still being removed by the head of the health head of health, like how does that even make any sense? Like what was the point of having an election or
Yeah.
vote in the first place?
Yeah, not to
Yeah,
go on a tangent here, but like just real quick, like when we talk about Trump appointing these people and then the people he appointed are not loyal enough, so they end up getting replaced anyways. Like you saw Eric Sieber in Virginia, who was picked by Trump. He was like, "Listen, man, I can't indict James Comey. Like, there's not a strong case here." And Trump's like, "Okay, I'll just replace you with this insurance lawyer, Lindsay Halligan, who has never
Yeah.
prosecuted a case a day in her life." You see, in New York City, you saw I'm blanking on her name. Um, she was being told to like drop the case against Eric Adams so that Eric Adams would be more willing to comply with ICE. And she was like, hey, this is like really corrupt quid pro quo. I'm not going to do this. Despite the fact that she was a conservative handpicked by Trump a few weeks earlier, then she gets fired and replaced. And it's like, even the loyalists are like not loyal enough, apparently.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. Well, Adam, we appreciate your time. This was great. I just heard you say that you're going to be in Jubilee, so excited to see that. I know you can't say who it was because you made sure to avoid that name, but we'll definitely keep an eye out for that. Do you know when the episode is set to be released?
It comes out this Sunday. And actually, they said that I don't have to keep it secret. So I can just say, I don't know if you guys know who Matt Nuclear is. It was a roundtable episode, so it was like four people having a discussion or whatever. It was
Awesome.
Matt Nuclear who was. Do you see that Amanda Seals Jubilee Surrounded?
Yeah.
He was like the guy who went viral for saying to her like, oh, like how can there be discrimination if like Chinese people make money, like some dumbass argument like that. It was him on the other side, and then I had Naima on my side as well. She like blew up a lot when the Charlie Kirk thing happened, so you guys will probably recognize her as well.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to see that. I'll definitely be tuning in this Sunday. We appreciate your time as always.
For
We
sure.
hope to do this again sometime soon. This was a lot of fun, but we appreciate you and you have a good rest of the day, my friend.
You too. Thanks for having me.
No problem.
yep.
Bye.